Hey guys, it's Jetpack, and I'm here with some more niche Nancy content. So I wanted to talk about what it would look like if the Nancy Drew games had DLC. So first off, DLC is downloadable content. If you don't know, it's additional content for gameplay that you can download after the initial purchase of the game. So it can be a lot of things: new characters, new tools, new weapons, if that's the kind of game you're playing. How is DLC different than microtransactions? And I think this is very important because I never want to see a microtransaction anywhere near Nancy Drew games. So microtransactions are microtransactions. Okay, so they're small purchases that can add up quickly in games. They're usually in free-to-play games, and they're sometimes called freemium. But to many gamers' distaste, they're making their way into paid games as well. They're also called pay-to-play. You see this a lot in multiplayer games. There's an incentive to make these purchases to make yourself a better player, to kind of give you a leg up in the gameplay. So it can get you power-ups, better characters, better armor, better weapons, better ingredients, all that kind of stuff. Microtransactions can also be completely aesthetic. So skins or just the look of a standard weapon is different. They also come in the form of loot boxes, which is you pay an amount for a chance to get a better item, which is gambling. And this is very controversial because a lot of these games are geared towards kids. You use real money from real life to buy these in-game transactions, which the conversions aren't clear. You can very easily end up spending a lot more than you realize. And with all these things being targeted towards kids, they're not using their money. They're using their parents' money, and often without their consent. And that's a whole nother thing of, oh, okay, parents should be watching their kids, blah, 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 blah. But we need to put some of the responsibility on these companies that are gearing these purchases towards kids in the first place. Anyway, DLC is different than microtransactions because it is extremely clear with DLC what you are getting or the price you're paying. There's no gamble to it. To say it a different way, it adds to the playability of a game you've owned and maybe already completed. So what does DLC cost? A lot of the DLC I personally see is anywhere from $10 to $20, but I'm going ballpark here. It really depends on the title, the developer, and all that stuff. What you're actually getting really affects the price of the DLC, as it should. So Midnight in Salem costs $22 right now. We can kind of anticipate Key costing anywhere from $25 to $35. And honestly, the way the economy and video game prices are heading right now, I would not be shocked to see if it was more. So let's say Mystery of the Seven Keys is right in the middle there at $30. To have DLC that costs $10, a third of the price, would be pretty substantial, but could be warranted depending on what they give us. This is all hypothetical. I have no insider knowledge of the Nancy Drew games development, but it would have to be a good DLC to cost that much. Keep in mind, DLC is not for everybody. It's usually going to attract the die-hard fans who really love playing the games. And they also have to have a high price tolerance for the games. To understand price tolerance, think about something that you would buy tomorrow if today it doubled in price. You have a high price tolerance for that item. Nancy Drew games aren't going to be that for everybody. Some people will be perfectly content watching a playthrough of their favorite streamer do a DLC, even if it were $1. Now that's not me, but I don't judge. It doesn't mean they're any less of a fan. They just don't see the value in it, and that's fine. Anyway, I can see a Nancy Drew DLC costing around $4.99 to $9.99, but it totally depends on the DLC. So let's talk about that. What would a Nancy Drew DLC look like? I've come up with a few different concepts depending on the price you want to stick to. Lower end of pricing, I'm talking $4.99 about, would have to be something that wouldn't take much effort on the development side to make it worth that price point. So I'm thinking an additional minigame that doesn't have to do with the plot at all, just a totally separate thing. Or maybe additional puzzles that don't affect the plot, maybe a second round of a original puzzle from the initial release of the game. They could also integrate a more difficult puzzle level for a puzzle that was in the original game, kind of like a level 2. Or even you're able to download the mini games from the original game to your desktop to play whenever you want. Now I know a lot of people have save files they create to be able to play these mini games whenever they want, but low effort, idea for DLC. Let's talk about the higher end of DLC that I envision. $9.99 price point. I'm thinking a new character to talk to. Now, obviously they could not be the culprit because the original game would be incomplete without a culprit, but maybe an accomplice. Getting bigger, maybe there's another mystery that Nancy is called to solve. Not a huge story in and of itself, but something small that might be somewhat related to the plot. Let's say Nancy's working at this cafe in Key, and all of a sudden somebody's like, oh my gosh, my wallet's stolen, my purse stolen, my bag stolen. And Nancy's like, oh, let me go help. And we track down that lead a bit. Maybe we learn little tidbits about the main story along the way. Again, nothing that would affect the plot in the original game, but maybe things that would add lore. If I know Nancy Drew fans, I know we love lore. And then finally, maybe a DLC could include a new location to explore. I'm envisioning, so the museum in the original game has a wing that's closed because they're setting it up for grand opening. Think May's exhibit in Midnight in Salem. And with the DLC, that wing opens up and we get to explore and learn more about the area. I'm a huge history nerd, so that would be totally worth it for me. Or maybe there's a souvenir shop that we can go to and buy gifts to send home to Frank. Or maybe there's a concession stand somewhere. I don't know, the possibilities are endless. So do I like the idea of a Nancy Drew DLC? Yes, I love it. For the right price. Let's be honest, I'm gonna get it no matter what it is. But I also wanna see my favorite game company succeed. Now, the only way I would want DLC is if the initial game was fully fleshed out. That's another very annoying practice that companies are coming up with, selling an unfinished game and then packaging more gameplay through a DLC. That is not what I want, and that is not what I'm suggesting at all. I want Nancy Drew games to be fully complete, wonderful, beautiful games that we have seen in the past, besides Mid, but I want to be spoiled occasionally with a DLC. They've been doing this for years, and they've probably had this whole conversation discussing this exact topic. And let's face it, the times of 2 games a year are long gone. So if we can get a game every other year and maybe a DLC every other year, I'd be really happy. Thanks so much for watching. I love nerding out about niche Nancy content, so if you want to see more of that, be sure to subscribe and find us other places. I'm constantly making quizzes and fun stuff for Instagram. We're on TikTok too. And catch us streaming on Twitch. We might be even playing a Nancy. Bye!